Hello everybody. Our topic today is a difficult one, as it seems many of the questions coming in to this series have been. We want to talk about divorce and remarriage. I'll begin by saying a brief word about God's intention for marriage. We find it first back in the Genesis story as recorded in Genesis 1:27, also in 5:2, where the Bible teaches that we are created male and female, and that our genders are a gift of God to us, part of the image of God in us. In Matthew 19, Jesus is asked specifically about divorce, and he reaches back to this Genesis passage to first teach some on marriage. And he says, haven't you heard what Genesis teaches? And then he cites the passage that we've so often heard read at weddings. For this reason, a man will leave his father and his mother and cling to his wife, and they shall become one flesh. Leave and cleave, as it were. Now, what happens when this doesn't work out as we had hoped? What happens when our aspirations for a lifelong marriage fall flat on us and we find ourselves divorced? Because to be sure, God's best intention for us is one man plus one woman in one marriage for one lifetime. That's his best. But many believers, for a variety of reasons, find themselves divorced. What does the Bible teach about divorce? Well, that's actually fairly plain. God says plainly in Malachi 2:16 that he hates divorce. I don't think God is alone there. I think most of us would say we hate divorce. We look around at the pain, the hurt, the devastation that's so often caused by divorce in all kinds of circumstances, in all of the parties involved. We would agree with God there that, yeah, we hate divorce. But what then happens to the Christian who finds themselves divorced and they wish to remarry? And here's the question, because believers disagree on this quite a bit. What does the Bible teach about divorce and remarriage? Well, Jesus picks up this topic actually himself in Matthew 5:31-32. And he does one of these things where he reaches back to the Old Testament. He says, you've heard it taught. And what they'd heard taught was Moses permitted divorce, Jesus says, because of the hardness of your hearts. Later rabbis had picked that up and really had weakened Moses' teaching to the point where a man could divorce his wife, not the other way around, for almost anything up to and including making a bad meal or burning the toast. And Jesus says, you've heard that said, but I tell you that anyone who divorces his wife, and here's the exception, except for reasons of sexual immorality, makes her a victim of adultery. And if you marry someone who's divorced outside of that reason, they commit adultery. Jesus picks this up again when he is asked about a divorce in Matthew 19 and teaches the same thing. He gives an exception there. And the thinking seems to be from Jesus that if the divorce is invalid, then the remarriage is invalid. But if the divorce is valid, and that is for reasons of sexual immorality, porneia is the Greek word, then remarriage is also valid. Paul gives us the one other exception that I know of in his teaching in 1 Corinthians 7. Where he is encouraging married Christian couples to stay together. But he does say in verse 15 that if a Christian is married to an unbeliever and the unbeliever abandons the Christian, they leave, and reconciliation is not possible, Paul says, let it be so. He says the believer is not bound in that situation. And that phrase is debated, not bound. My study has led me to believe that it means the believer is not bound any longer to the covenant of marriage because it's been broken. Sexual immorality functions exactly the same way. It breaks the covenant between man and wife. And therefore I believe that's why Jesus said in that case, because the divorce is valid, remarriage is also possible. But I want to conclude by stressing that nowhere does the Bible command divorce. Nowhere does the Bible suggest it's a good idea. But it does, to my mind at least, give two situations whereby divorce is permitted. But we will know that the whole theme of the gospel is reconciliation. God is reconciled in Christ to all of humanity, whoever will accept him, and that we as humanity are to be reconciled one to another, particularly in our marriages. So to my mind, biblical advice would be that couples certainly seek reconciliation first and foremost, and involve other people who are trusted and get some help in their marriage. But to the specific question of whether or not the Bible ever permits remarriage, I would say yes in the two circumstances I've outlined, which is sexual immorality in the marriage, and two, when the believer is abandoned by the non-believer. As always, I look forward to your comments and your questions, and I'll do my best to answer what I can. Thanks for listening.